Hey guys, and welcome back. My name is Miss Danielson, and today we're having a look at square numbers. Now, there are some number facts that you simply need to know. We need to know our tables, for example. I hope you didn't hit pause and just copy that whole table, or if you did, I hope you at least noticed the mistake. Those aren't the multiples of 6, those are the multiples of 12. You should know your times table, at least from 1 to 12. There are some particular multiples, though, that you definitely need to know. And those are the ones that go down the diagonal here. Do you know what those are called? I hope the title gave it away for you. These are our square numbers because they're the result of multiplying a value by itself. You should know your square numbers fairly well. If you don't know them, you should be able to do these multiplications quickly without a calculator. So you maybe want to jot these down right now. Go ahead and work them out for yourself. No point in waiting for me to work them out for you. You need the practice. Okay, so we got 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, and 144. I do sometimes make mistakes though, so have a close look, make sure I haven't made a mistake. Right, knowing your square numbers, you should also be able to square negative numbers. Note that the brackets are very important. -1 squared versus -1 in brackets squared will give you completely different answers. Have a think about that before I explain. -1 squared has got a power of 2, which is only affecting the 1, not the negative sign. Whereas when I square -1, which is in brackets, that power of 2 is affecting both the negative sign and the 1. Do you note the difference yet? -1 times 1, the value won't change, it'll still be -1. However, -1 times -1 will be +1. You should remember that from when we were multiplying integers. We know that a negative multiplied by a negative will give a positive. So we should know that all square numbers will be positive. Whether it's a negative times a negative, the sign is the same, the answer is positive, or a positive times a positive. Again, if the signs are the same, which they must be when we square a number because we're multiplying a value by itself, in all cases, square numbers must be positive. You're going to want to write that down. Now, if you know that squaring a negative will always give you a positive answer, and you know your square numbers, you should very easily be able to tell me the squares of all of these negative numbers. -1 squared, when I use brackets, means -1 times -1, which will give me a positive answer, and it's the same thing as 1 squared. So all of our negative values squared have the same answers as our positive values squared. You may want to write that down. Next, let's look at squaring decimal values. Take special care with the place value. Here's an example, 0.3 squared. I know what you're thinking. 0.3 times 0.3, I'll just do 3 times 3, that's 9. So it'll be 0.9, right? Wrong. The 9 is in the wrong place value. It would help if we use fractions before we square. And I know some of you have this fraction phobia, but we've got to get over it because working with fractions is actually a lot easier. First of all, we could say that 0.3, using our place value names, is 3/10. So 0.3 squared is 3/10 times 3/10. And when we multiply fractions together, we just need to multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. So 3 times 3 on the top and 10 times 10 on the bottom. Working with fractions means I don't need to worry about decimal values. 3 times 3 is 9 and 10 times 10 is 100. That's 9 hundredths. So, as my question was given as a decimal value, I should give my answer in decimal form. 9 hundredths. can be written as 9/100. That is 0.09 because the 9 is in the hundredths position. Simple. Please try to work this way in future to avoid this place value error. Let's try a few more examples. If you feel ready, feel free to hit pause and try them for yourself. I'm going to start going through them by setting these up as a fraction squared. So 0.1 squared is actually 1/10 squared. So 1/10 times 1/10 as fractions means I'm going to multiply my 1's together and multiply my 10's together. So that's going to be 1/100. That's 1/100. I hope you had the right place value for your answer. Let's go on and try question B. Now 0.03 is 3 in the hundredths position. So this is 3/100 times 3/100. That means 3 times 3 over 100 times 100. 3 times 3 is 9, and 100 times 100 is 10,000. There are 2 zeros in 100, so 100 times 100 will give me an answer with 4 zeros in it. That's 9 tens of thousands. That's going to be a 9 in the 4th decimal place. That's 4 digits after the decimal. Next, we've got 1.1 squared. Now, this may not look obvious and familiar to you, but that's the same thing as 11 divided by 10. So 11 over 10 squared is 11 over 10 times 11 over 10. And if you know your square numbers, you should know 11 squared, and you should know 10 squared. 11 squared is 121, 10 squared is 100. So that's 121 over 100, which we will either want to convert to a mixed number because it's top heavy, but I would prefer as a decimal as our question was given as a decimal. So that's 121 divided by 100, that's 1 and 21 hundredths. On to D, we've got 12 hundredths because the 2 is in the hundredths position. So this is 12 over 100 multiplied by 12 over 100. Again, we should know our square numbers. 12 squared is 144, and 100 squares we've done in question B. That's 10,000. So 144 over 10,000, that's 144 divided by 10,000. Move your decimal place 4 places. So that's going to be 0.0144. Next, 80 squared. We didn't learn our square numbers up to that high of a number, but you should notice that 80 squared will be the same thing as 8 times 10 in brackets squared, so that both of those values are squared. That's 8 times 10 multiplied by 8 times 10. If you know what 8 times 8 is and you know what 10 times 10 is, you should know that this makes 64 times 100. That is 6,400. Using that same idea, we can go on and do 2.2 squared. I know we didn't learn 22 squared, but you should notice that 2.2 squared is the same thing as 2 times 1.1 in brackets squared. And we've done that above in C. So that's 2 times 11 over 10 times 2 times 11 over 10. Multiplying our fractions together, we'll multiply our numerators. So that's going to be 2 times 2 times 11 times 11, and multiply our denominators, which is 10 times 10. We've got 2 squared times 11 squared on the numerator, and 10 squared in the denominator. That's going to be 4 times 121 over 100, which is simply 4.84. See what I mean about how fractions help? Now, I hope you've got that because it's time for you to get some practice now. Go ahead and copy these questions, set them out as fractions squared, and be careful because some of these are negative and some of them have brackets while some of them don't. Go ahead and hit pause now and give that a go. No calculators, remember, and hit play when you're ready for the answers. I hope you've taken your time to hit pause. Here come your answers. for the first row, for the second row, for the third row, and for the fourth row. Notice with question J, I tried to fool you there by putting 1.0 squared, and you might have written that as 1 over 1, or you might have just simplified and said that was 1 squared, which of course simplifies to be 1. Those zeros after the decimal point are in red because they're not necessary. They're trailing zeros after a decimal point with no value. I hope you found this lesson interesting and helpful. Please let me know if I've left anything unclear. Otherwise, keep practicing, and I'll see you soon.